The BMW arrived on my brother's 17th birthday. Midnight blue, leather interior, still had that new car smell. I watched from my bedroom window as our parents presented it to him with a giant red bow, Mom crying happy tears, Dad clapping him on the back like he'd accomplished something other than being born. I was 19. I'd been driving a 2003 Honda Civic with a cracked windshield and 180,000 miles that I'd bought myself with money saved from working 2 jobs through high school. Nobody cried happy tears when I bought that car. Nobody even noticed. My name is Elena Russo, and this is the story of how my golden child brother tried to destroy me and ended up destroying himself instead. My brother's name was Dylan Michael Hartwell. Even his name sounded privileged. He was 3 years younger than me, and from the moment he was born, he was the sun around which our entire family orbited. Perfect grades came easy to him. Sports trophies filled his room. College acceptance letters poured in from every Ivy League school. When he chose Princeton, our parents threw him a party that cost more than my entire first year of community college tuition. Meanwhile, I was the family disappointment. I'd gone to community college because it was all I could afford, even with scholarships and 2 jobs. I'd studied business and real estate while Dylan studied economics at Princeton on our parents' dime. I'd bought my first small condo at 22 with a down payment I'd scraped together over 3 years. Dylan got a luxury apartment near campus, fully furnished, rent paid monthly by Dad. By the time Dylan graduated, I owned 3 rental properties. By the time he was 25, I had a small real estate investment company and was making more money than our father ever had. But our parents still talked about Dylan's achievements and my little real estate hobby in the same breath, like one was a career and one was something I did to pass time. I should have known something was wrong when Dylan showed up at my office unannounced. I hadn't seen him in 3 months, which was normal. We weren't close. He'd never needed me for anything, and I'd stopped trying to have a relationship with someone who only called when he needed money. Except this time, he wasn't asking for money. He was furious. "You bought the Riverside property," he said, slamming into my office like he owned it. "That was supposed to be mine." I looked up from the contract I was reviewing. "Excuse me?" "The Riverside development. I told Dad I wanted it. I told him I was putting together investors, and you went behind my back and bought it." I set down my pen carefully. "Dylan, I've had my eye on that property for 2 years. I've been negotiating with the owner for 8 months. I bought it because it's a good investment for my company. I didn't even know you were interested in real estate." "Of course I'm interested." His face was red, veins standing out on his neck. "I've been planning to start my own development company. Dad was going to help me finance it, and now you've stolen my opportunity." "I didn't steal anything. I bought a property that was for sale. If you wanted it, you should have made an offer." "With what money?" Dylan shouted. "Unlike you, I don't have a trust fund to fall back on." I stared at him. "What are you talking about? I don't have a trust fund. I built my business from nothing." "Bullshit. How else could you afford 3 properties by 25? Dad said you must have had help from someone, an investor, a sugar daddy, something." The casual cruelty of it, the assumption that I couldn't possibly have succeeded on my own merit, made something cold settle in my chest. "Get out of my office, Dylan." "This isn't over," he said, pointing at me. "I'm going to prove you got that money illegally. I'm going to prove you're not the perfect daughter everyone thinks you are." He stormed out, and I sat there shaking with anger and something else, confusion. Why did Dylan think I had a trust fund? Why would Dad tell him that? I didn't have to wait long for answers. 3 days later, the FBI showed up at my office. Special Agent Caroline Mitchell and Agent David Park sat across from my desk, badges out, expressions serious. "Ms. Russo, we're investigating possible financial crimes related to your family's business, Hartwell Construction. Your name has come up in our investigation, and we need to ask you some questions." My blood went cold. What kind of financial crimes? Embezzlement, money laundering. We have evidence that approximately $1.2 million has been moved through various accounts over the past 4 years. One of those accounts is registered in your name. That's impossible. I don't have any accounts connected to my parents' business. Agent Mitchell slid a document across the desk. This account was opened 4 years ago with your social security number and identification. It's been receiving regular deposits from Hartwell Construction's operating account, and then those funds have been transferred to offshore accounts. I looked at the paperwork and felt sick. It was an account in my name that I'd never opened, an account that had processed over $1 million in what was clearly stolen money, and the signature on the opening documents, while not perfect, looked enough like mine that a casual observer might not notice. I didn't open this account, I said quietly. Someone used my identity. That's what they all say, Agent Park said, not unkindly, but the evidence is pretty clear. We're going to need you to come down to the field office for a formal interview. That's when I called the only person I knew would believe me, my grandfather, Joseph Russo. Grandpa Joe was my mother's father, a retired NYPD detective who'd spent 30 years working financial crimes. He was 78 years old, sharp as ever, and the only member of my family who'd never treated me like I was less than Dylan. "Grandpa, I need help," I said when he answered. "The FBI thinks I've been embezzling from Dad's company. Someone opened accounts in my name. Someone's framing me." There was a long silence. Then, "I'll be on the next flight to Boston. Don't say anything to anyone until I get there. Not your parents, not Dylan, not the FBI without a lawyer present. Understand?" "Yes." "Elena, honey, I need you to think carefully. Who would want to frame you? Who has access to your personal information and your parents' business finances?" I already knew the answer. There was only one person who fit both criteria, only one person who'd been acting strange, who'd accused me of stealing his opportunity, who'd threatened to prove I got my money illegally. Dylan. Grandpa Joe arrived the next day with a lawyer, a forensic accountant, and a determination that reminded me why criminals used to be terrified of him. We spent 3 days going through every document, every transaction, every piece of evidence the FBI had gathered. And what we found was damning. Not for me, for Dylan. The embezzlement had started 4 years ago, right after Dylan graduated from Princeton. Small amounts at first, a few thousand here and there from Hartwell Construction's accounts. Then it had escalated. By the second year, Dylan was taking $50,000 a month. By the third year, it was $100,000. The money was going to offshore gambling accounts. Dylan had a serious gambling problem that our parents either didn't know about or were ignoring. He'd lost over $1.5 million in 3 years betting on sports, playing online poker, and making increasingly desperate attempts to win back his losses. And when the construction company accounts started showing irregularities, when Dad's accountant began asking questions, Dylan had panicked. He'd created fake accounts in my name, transferred some of the stolen money through them, and built a paper trail that would lead investigators to me instead of him. He'd tried to frame his own sister for his crimes. "This is bad," Grandpa Joe said, looking at the evidence spread across my kitchen table. "This is really bad. Your brother is facing federal charges, 10 years minimum, probably more with the amount he stole and the attempted frame-up. What about Mom and Dad? Do they know?" Grandpa's expression darkened. "That's what I need to find out, because either your parents are victims of Dylan's crimes or they've been enabling him, and I have a terrible feeling it's the latter." We went to my parents' house the next day. Grandpa Joe, the lawyer, the forensic accountant, and me. We laid out everything we'd found: the gambling, the embezzlement, the fake accounts, the frame-up attempt. My mother cried, but not the way I expected. These weren't tears of shock or betrayal. These were tears of someone who'd been caught. "We were trying to handle it quietly," she said, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. "Dylan made some mistakes, but he's getting help. He promised to pay everything back. We didn't want to ruin his future over one bad decision." "One bad decision?" I said, my voice shaking. "Mom, he stole $1.5 million. He tried to frame me for it. He was going to let me go to federal prison for his crimes." "He wouldn't have let it go that far," Dad said, "but he wouldn't meet my eyes. He just needed to buy some time to figure out how to fix things. If you hadn't been so successful with your business, if you hadn't bought that property he wanted, none of this would have escalated." I stared at my father. "Are you seriously blaming me for this? For working hard and building a business while Dylan gambled away millions of stolen dollars?" "You've always been jealous of Dylan, always competing with him. Maybe if you'd been more supportive instead of flaunting your success." "That's enough," Grandpa Joe said, his voice like steel. "I didn't raise you to be this person, Caroline. Your daughter built something from nothing, while you threw money at a son who's been stealing from you for years. And instead of holding him accountable, you're blaming Elena for his choices? He's our son. What were we supposed to do? Turn him in? Ruin his life?" "Yes," Grandpa shouted. "That's exactly what you should have done the first time you found out. Instead, you enabled him, covered for him, and let him escalate to the point where he tried to destroy his sister's life to save himself." That's when Dylan walked in. He froze when he saw all of us gathered in the living room. His eyes darted to the documents spread across the coffee table. "What's going on?" he asked, but his voice shook. "The FBI knows everything," I said quietly. "Grandpa and I gave them all the evidence, the real evidence, showing that you embezzled the money, not me. They're issuing a warrant for your arrest." Dylan's face went white, then red, then he lunged at me. Grandpa Joe, 78 years old with a bad hip, moved faster than any of us expected. He intercepted Dylan, twisted his arm behind his back with the muscle memory of 30 years on the force, and pushed him face first onto the couch. "You're done, kid. You stole from your family. You tried to frame your sister. You're looking at federal prison time, and there's nothing Mommy and Daddy can do to save you this time." "This is your fault," Dylan screamed at me, thrashing against Grandpa's hold. "If you'd just given me the Riverside property, if you just shared some of your success instead of flaunting your success. The entitlement, the absolute refusal to take responsibility, it was breathtaking."
"I didn't make you steal," I said. "I didn't make you gamble. I didn't make you try to destroy me to cover your crimes. Those were your choices, Dylan, and now you get to live with the consequences." That's when Dylan said something that changed everything. "I'm your brother. You're supposed to protect me. That's what family does. Or does it not count because I'm not really one of you?" The room went silent. "What did you say?" Mom whispered. Dylan seemed to realize he'd said too much. "Nothing. I didn't mean—" "Not really one of us?" I repeated. "What does that mean?" Dylan looked at our parents, something desperate in his eyes. "Tell them, just tell them the truth. Maybe if they know, they'll understand why this family has always been so messed up." My mother burst into tears. Real tears this time, the kind that come from years of secrets finally breaking open. "You're adopted," she said to Dylan, not looking at him. "We adopted you when you were 3 days old. Elena doesn't know because we decided it was better to raise you as full biological siblings. But you found your adoption papers 2 years ago. We thought we'd hidden them, but you found them." I sat down slowly, my legs suddenly unable to hold me. "Dylan is adopted?" "We loved you so much," Dad said, looking at Dylan. "We wanted to give you everything. We never wanted you to feel less than or different or like you weren't truly our son. So we gave you every opportunity, every advantage, everything we could to make sure you felt secure and loved." You gave him too much, Grandpa Joe said quietly. You overcompensated. You gave him so much that he never learned the value of anything, and you gave Elena so little that she learned to rely only on herself. You tried to fix a perceived inequality and created a real one. We were trying to protect him, Mom sobbed. The adoption papers said his biological mother was a drug addict. His biological father was in prison. We wanted him to have a better life than that. We wanted him to be successful, stable, happy. But instead of teaching him to earn success, you handed it to him, I said, understanding dawning. The BMW, the Ivy League tuition, the luxury apartment, the job at Dad's company. You gave him everything because you felt guilty about his biological parents, and you gave me nothing because you assumed I'd be fine, because I was really yours. The look on my mother's face told me I was right. And me? Dylan said, his voice breaking. What was I supposed to do with that? How was I supposed to live up to all that pressure, all those expectations, all that money you spent to prove I was worth loving? For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt something almost like sympathy for my brother, not for what he'd done, never for that, but for the impossible situation my parents had created, giving him everything while teaching him nothing about how to be a person worthy of what he'd been given. The FBI arrested Dylan 3 days later. He was charged with embezzlement, wire fraud, identity theft, and attempted fraud. The evidence was overwhelming. His gambling addiction was documented, the fake accounts in my name were traced back to him, his own computer had searches for how to frame someone for embezzlement and offshore accounts that can't be traced. He hired the best lawyers money could buy. My parents mortgaged their house to pay for his defense. But there was no defense that could overcome the evidence or the fact that he'd tried to send his innocent sister to federal prison to save himself. Dylan took a plea deal, 5 years in federal prison, 3 years probation, full restitution of the embezzled funds plus damages. My parents would lose their business, their house, their retirement savings trying to make it right. The night before Dylan's sentencing, he tried to kill himself. Or at least he tried to make it look like he tried to kill himself. He took a handful of aspirin, called 911 himself, and then posted a dramatic note on social media about how the pressure and expectations had destroyed him. The doctors at the hospital called it a gesture, not a genuine attempt, a cry for attention, for sympathy, for one more chance at manipulating the narrative to make himself the victim. It didn't work. The judge saw through it. Everyone saw through it. But something changed after that night in the hospital. Maybe it was hitting rock bottom. Maybe it was finally facing consequences he couldn't charm or buy his way out of. Maybe it was the prison psychiatrist who actually diagnosed his issues instead of enabling them. Whatever it was, Dylan slowly began to change. Really change, not the performative change he'd done before to get out of trouble. He wrote me letters from prison. The first few I threw away without reading, but Grandpa Joe convinced me to read the next one. Elena, it began, I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't deserve forgiveness, but I need you to know that I understand now what I did to you, what I tried to do to you. I was so consumed by my own entitlement, my own fear of not being good enough, my addiction, that I was willing to destroy you to save myself. That's not something I can ever take back, but I'm working every day to become someone who would never even consider doing something like that again. I'm in therapy, I'm in addiction treatment, I'm facing what I am, someone who was given everything and appreciated nothing, someone who hurt the people who loved me because I was too broken to love myself. I'm sorry. I'll spend the rest of my life being sorry, but more importantly, I'll spend the rest of my life being different. I hope someday you can see that, not for forgiveness, just so you know that your brother, adopted or not, you were always my sister, isn't the monster who tried to frame you anymore.
He's trying to be someone better, someone worthy of the second chance he doesn't deserve. Love, Dylan. I cried reading that letter, not because it fixed anything, not because it erased the trauma of almost going to prison for his crimes, but because for the first time in my life, my brother sounded like a real person, not the golden child character my parents had created. Dylan served 3.5 years. He got out early for good behavior and genuine progress in treatment. When he was released, he moved to Oregon, far from our family and the expectations that had destroyed him. He got a job as a construction worker, starting at the bottom of the same industry where he'd once stolen millions. He attended AA meetings and therapy 3 times a week. He lived in a studio apartment and drove a used Toyota. He paid me back every cent he could. Not all at once, not quickly, but slowly, painfully, he sent me money orders every month. $200, $300, whatever he could spare from his modest paycheck. It would take decades to repay what his crimes had cost me in legal fees, stress, and damaged reputation, but he was trying. As for my parents, they lost everything. The business went bankrupt, the house was foreclosed, they moved into a small apartment and learned, for the first time in their lives, what it felt like to struggle financially. I didn't help them. Not at first. I was too angry, too hurt by the years of favoritism and the ultimate betrayal of their willingness to let me take the fall for Dylan's crimes. But Grandpa Joe talked to me about forgiveness. Not the kind that forgets or excuses, the kind that releases you from carrying other people's guilt. They made terrible choices, Grandpa said. They damaged both their children in different ways, but they're still your parents, and they're learning. Slowly, painfully, but they're learning. I eventually paid off their debts, not as a gift, but as a loan with interest and repayment terms. I helped them find jobs, modest work they'd never had to do before. I watched them learn, for the first time, what I'd known since I was 16, that nothing in life is free, and the things you earn matter more than the things you're given. Dylan and I see each other once a year now, usually at Grandpa Joe's house, neutral territory. We're not close, we probably never will be, but we're honest with each other in a way we never were growing up. "Do you ever regret it?" Dylan asked me last Thanksgiving. "Not helping me when you could have? Not bailing me out?" "Never," I said. "You needed to face consequences. Real consequences, not the fake kind Mom and Dad always gave you." "I know. I hated you for it then. I wanted to blame you for everything. But you were right. I needed to lose everything to understand what anything was worth." "Do you ever regret it?" I asked. "Trying to destroy me?" "Every single day," Dylan said, and his eyes were wet. "Every single day I wake up and remember what I did to you, what I almost did to you, and I work to be someone who would never do that again. But the regret never goes away, and it shouldn't. That's part of my consequence too." Today, I'm 35. I own a successful real estate investment company. I have a husband who values my work and celebrates my success. I have 2 properties I love and a life I built entirely myself. Dylan is 32. He's a foreman now, leading a construction crew, making decent money. He's been sober for 8 years. He's dating someone who knows his whole story and loves him anyway. He'll be paying back his debts for the rest of his life, but he's doing it. My parents are learning, slowly, what it means to value people for who they are, not what they cost or what status they provide. They're working jobs they never imagined they'd have to work, living in ways they never thought they'd have to live, but they're still here, still trying. And Grandpa Joe, at 83, still reminds all of us that love without accountability is just enabling, and that the hardest thing a parent can do is let their children face the consequences of their own choices. My name is Elena Russo. My golden child brother got everything: Ivy League education, BMW at 17, unlimited parental support. He threw it all away on gambling and tried to frame me for his crimes to save himself. I got nothing from my parents, except the understanding that I had to earn everything myself. And in the end, that was the greatest gift they could have given me, even if they didn't mean it that way. Because I learned my worth wasn't in what people gave me, it was in what I built with my own hands, my own work, my own determination. Dylan learned that lesson the hard way, after he'd lost everything and served prison time. But he learned it, and now he's building something real, something earned, something that can't be taken away because it's based on who he is, not what he's given. This isn't a story about revenge, it's a story about consequences, about how love without boundaries destroys the people you're trying to protect, about the hardest thing you can do for someone is refuse to save them from themselves. If you're the scapegoat child, the one who got nothing while your sibling got everything, hear this. Your worth isn't measured by what your parents gave you, it's measured by what you do with what you have. And sometimes being given nothing is the greatest gift of all, because it forces you to discover what you're truly capable of. If you're the golden child, the one who got everything, hear this. Gifts without earned consequences teach you nothing except entitlement. Real love means being held accountable, not being protected from reality. And the people who love you most are sometimes the ones who refuse to save you from the results of your own choices. My brother tried to destroy me. My parents let him try. And in the end, the only thing that saved our family was the truth, consequences, and the refusal to cover up dysfunction with money and denial. That's not a fairy tale ending, but it's an honest one. And sometimes, honesty is the only foundation strong enough to build real healing on.